At 32 years old, Charlie Munger had $11,000 in the bank. He thought he was doing fine. Then he met a man at a conference who mentioned, almost casually, that he'd saved $250,000 by age 35. The man wasn't a doctor. He wasn't some tech genius. He worked in insurance, same income bracket as Munger, maybe even less. But he had something Munger didn't. He understood that saving your first $50,000 isn't about math. It's about winning a war against your own psychology. Most people never figure this out. They think saving money is simple arithmetic. Earn more than you spend. Put the difference in a savings account. Repeat. But that's like saying climbing Mount Everest is simple. Just put one foot in front of the other until you reach the top. Technically true. Practically useless. The first $50,000 is where the human brain reveals its true nature. And here's what Munger learned over nearly a century of watching people build and lose fortunes. Your brain doesn't want you to have capital. It wants comfort. It wants status. It wants the dopamine hit of a new purchase. Your brain is not your friend when it comes to building wealth. It's a saboteur wearing a friendly face. By the time Munger reached 99 years old, he'd watched thousands of people try to cross this threshold. Maybe 1 in 20 actually makes it. The rest, they earn decent money their whole lives and retire with almost nothing. They blame the economy, their boss, bad luck. But the real enemy was staring at them in the mirror every morning. This is the story of how Munger cracked the code. How he understood the psychological warfare that destroys most people's financial futures, and why the first $50,000 is the most important number in wealth building. Munger identified 3 psychological traps that keep people poor, not struggling poor. Comfortable poor, the kind where someone makes $70,000 a year and can't scrape together $5,000 for an emergency. If you don't understand these traps, you'll spend your whole life running in place. Just like Munger almost did before he figured it out. The first trap is what he called the comfort creep. Every time someone gets a raise, their brain immediately recalibrates what normal feels like. You made $50,000 last year, you lived fine. This year you make $60,000. Does your savings account grow by $10,000? Of course not. Within 3 months you're living like someone who makes $60,000. Better apartment, nicer dinners, subscription services you barely use. Your brain whispers the same lie to everyone. You deserve this, you worked hard. And maybe you did work hard. But deserving something and affording it are 2 different things. Munger watched this play out with a colleague in the 1950s. Smart man, an engineer, got regular raises, started at $8,000 a year, worked his way up to $18,000 over a decade. Everyone thought he was set for life. By the time he retired, he had less saved than when he started. Why? Because every raise came with a lifestyle upgrade. Better car, bigger house, country club membership. He spent his entire career earning more and staying broke. His wife drove a Cadillac. His kids went to private school. He looked successful, but when he hit 65, he had nothing but a pension that barely covered his inflated lifestyle. The mathematics are brutal, and Munger ran these numbers over and over. If you save 10% of $50,000, that's $5,000 a year. Sounds good, right? Except when you get that raise to $60,000, you don't save $6,000, you save maybe $4,000, because everything else got more expensive. You moved to a nicer place, you bought a car with a payment, you started eating out more because you can afford it now. This is how people stay on the hamster wheel forever. They're always almost wealthy, always about to turn the corner. But the corner never comes because they keep moving the finish line. Munger saw it everywhere. Lawyers making 6 figures with negative net worth. Doctors driving luxury cars they couldn't actually afford. Executives living in houses that ate half their salary. The pattern was always the same. Income goes up. Lifestyle goes up faster. Savings stay flat or even decline. And nobody wants to admit they're caught in the trap because admitting it means facing an uncomfortable truth. They've been playing the wrong game their entire adult life. Munger learned this lesson the hard way, and he never forgot it. When he started making real money as a lawyer in the 1950s, his first instinct was to look successful. Better suits, better office, better car. He was trying to signal to the world that he'd made it. This is what successful lawyers did, wasn't it? You showed your status through visible markers of achievement. Then one day he sat down and did the math. He was earning good money by the standards of the time, but he was saving almost nothing. Every dollar that came in seemed to find a way out just as quickly. He was playing dress-up with his wealth instead of actually building it. That's when Munger made a decision that changed everything. He would keep living like he made half of what he actually earned. That extra 50%? It went straight into investments before he could touch it. It was automatic, non-negotiable. The money disappeared from his checking account the day his paycheck arrived. Did he look as successful as his peers? No. Did he care? Not even a little. Because Munger understood something they didn't. Looking rich is the fastest way to stay poor. Appearing wealthy and being wealthy are not just different, they're opposites. His colleagues thought he was cheap. Some even felt sorry for him. Poor Charlie, they'd say over lunch. Works so hard but can't afford a decent car. Meanwhile, Munger was driving a modest vehicle and piling up capital. Let them think what they wanted. While they were impressing strangers at stoplights, he was building a foundation that would last a lifetime. The trick, Munger realized, isn't deprivation. It's invisibility. You don't have to live like a monk. You don't have to eat ramen and never enjoy anything. You just have to live below your means and keep your mouth shut about it. The people who announce their frugality are usually just as broke as the people who announce their spending. Both are playing for an audience. Real wealth is built when nobody's watching. Years later, when Munger was already worth hundreds of millions, he still lived in the same house he'd bought decades earlier. He still drove modest cars. He still avoided the trappings of visible wealth. Not because he couldn't afford them. He could have bought entire car dealerships. But because he'd learned that once you start optimizing for appearance, you never stop. The audience always demands more. And here's what most people miss. The habits that get you to $50,000 are the same habits that get you to $50 million. Munger knew this. If he couldn't control his spending when he had a little, he wouldn't be able to control it when he had a lot. The discipline had to be there from the beginning, or it would never be there at all. The second trap that Munger identified is comparison anxiety. This one, he believed, kills more financial dreams than any market crash in history. Human beings are comparison machines. We don't evaluate our lives in absolute terms. We evaluate them relative to the people around us. And in a world where everyone broadcasts their best moments, that's a recipe for financial suicide. Your college roommate buys a Tesla. Your cousin renovates their kitchen. Your coworker takes a vacation to Europe and posts 47 pictures on social media. And every single time, your brain does the same calculation without you even realizing it. Am I falling behind? The answer doesn't even matter, because once you start playing that game, you've already lost. You can't outspend the Joneses. There will always be someone with a bigger house, a nicer car, a fancier vacation, always. And if you're measuring your worth by what you own compared to others, you'll spend your whole life chasing a finish line that doesn't exist. Munger lived through the Great Depression. He watched it destroy families, businesses, entire communities. And you know what he learned from that experience. The appearance of wealth means nothing. Men who looked wealthy on Monday became destitute by Friday when the banks collapsed. The fancy car in the driveway, repossessed. The big house, foreclosed. The expensive suits, sold for pennies at liquidation sales. The only thing that mattered was the reality of wealth. And the reality is built in silence, in savings accounts and investment portfolios that nobody sees. It's not exciting, it's not Instagram-worthy, but it's real. When Munger and Warren Buffett started Berkshire Hathaway, they didn't try to impress anyone. They didn't buy fancy offices in Manhattan. They didn't hire big staffs or throw lavish parties. They worked out of Omaha, in modest offices with a skeleton crew. They just accumulated capital, quietly and relentlessly. While other guys their age were buying sports cars and vacation homes, Munger and Buffett were compounding. Their peers looked richer. But Munger and Buffett became richer. Big difference. The guys with the sports cars are mostly forgotten now. The guys who compounded quietly. They built empires. The psychological trick here is simple to understand but incredibly hard to execute. You have to kill your ego. Your ego wants validation. It wants people to know you're successful. It wants acknowledgement, admiration, applause. But validation is expensive, and wealth is built in the dark. Nobody's going to pat you on the back for having $50,000 in index funds. Nobody's going to admire your 15-year-old car. Nobody's going to be impressed that you skipped the expensive vacation. And that's exactly why most people never build wealth. They need the applause more than they need the money. They'd rather have the temporary validation of looking successful than the permanent reality of being financially secure. Munger made a deliberate choice. He stopped going to events where people showed off. He stopped reading magazines that made him want things he didn't need. He stopped socializing with people whose primary goal in life was to signal status, not because he was insecure or antisocial, because he was rational. He knew that every hour spent feeling envious was an hour he could have spent building something real. Envy, Munger understood, is a tax on your happiness and your bank account. It costs you twice. First, it makes you spend money you shouldn't. Second, it makes you miserable while you're spending it. He never met an envious rich person in his entire life, but he met plenty of envious broke people who thought one more purchase would fix how they felt. It never did. Here's something Munger rarely talked about publicly, but it shaped his entire financial philosophy: the loneliness of building wealth. When you decide to save your first $50,000, you're essentially deciding to become invisible. Your friends go out. You stay home. Your colleagues upgrade their cars. You keep driving the old one. Your family questions your choices. You keep quiet and keep saving. It's lonely. Nobody celebrates you. Nobody understands what you're doing, and the people who are supposed to be closest to you often become your biggest critics. Why are you so cheap? Why don't you ever want to do anything fun? When are you going to start living a little? Munger heard all of it. Family members thought he was being foolish, passing up good times for some abstract future benefit. Friends stopped inviting him to expensive dinners because they knew he'd decline. Colleagues made jokes about his frugality behind his back. But here's what Munger understood that they didn't. The loneliness is temporary. The poverty is permanent. If you need constant social validation, you'll never build wealth. If you can endure a decade of people thinking you're weird, you'll spend the rest of your life not caring what anyone thinks because you'll have the ultimate freedom, financial independence. The people who mocked Munger's old car in 1960, most of them never retired comfortably. The colleagues who thought he was cheap, many of them worked into their 70s because they had no choice. The family members who questioned his priorities, they often came to him later asking for financial help. This is the part nobody tells you about wealth building. It's not just about money. It's about being willing to be misunderstood for years. It's about watching people around you make terrible financial decisions and not being able to save them because they won't listen. It's about knowing you're playing a different game and being okay with playing it alone. Munger once said that if you're not willing to be lonely for a while, you'll probably stay poor forever. The crowd moves together, and the crowd is almost always wrong about money. They panic together. They spend together. They go broke together. The only way to break free is to separate yourself from the herd, even when it feels isolating. But here's the reward. Once you cross that $50,000 threshold, once your capital starts generating its own returns, the loneliness evaporates. Suddenly you have options. You can be generous with people you care about. You can take risks that others can't afford. You can say no to things you don't want to do. The years of sacrifice compound into decades of freedom. The third trap that Munger identified is perhaps the most insidious. The illusion of time. When you're in your 20s or 30s, $50,000 feels impossibly far away. You look at your current savings, maybe $2,000 or $5,000, and the gap feels insurmountable. So your brain does what brains do. It puts the problem off. I'll get serious about saving next year. After I pay off the car, after the wedding, after we buy the house, after the kids are older. Next year never comes. Life doesn't give you a clean window to start building wealth. There will always be an expense, an emergency, a reason to delay. And every year you wait, the mathematics get worse. Munger understood this deeply because he'd done the calculations. If you save $50,000 by age 30 and let it grow at 8% a year, by age 60 it becomes $500,000. You did nothing except wait. You didn't add another dollar. You just let compound interest do its work. But if you save that same $50,000 by age 40, it only grows to $230,000 by age 60. You cost yourself $270,000 by waiting 10 years. That's not a small difference. That's life-changing money. That's the difference between a comfortable retirement and a stressful one. Most people don't understand this. They think they'll make it up later by saving more aggressively. But time is the secret ingredient in compounding, and you can't buy it back. You can't work harder to replace it. You can't get a loan for lost years. Once it's gone forever. Munger was lucky in one sense. He figured this out young, not because he was brilliant, but because he was scared. He saw what happened to his father's clients during the Depression. He saw men who thought they had time suddenly run out of it. Retirement-age men looking for any work they could find because their savings had evaporated. Families that had to move in with relatives because they couldn't afford rent. Those images burned themselves into young Charlie's brain. He decided right then that he would not be one of those men. He would not assume tomorrow would cooperate with his plans. He would not gamble on having more time. So Munger treated every dollar like it mattered, because it did. A dollar saved at 25 is worth $5 saved at 45. That's not philosophy or motivational nonsense. That's pure mathematics. And if you ignore math, math will punish you. The tragedy Munger witnessed throughout his life was people who finally got serious about money in their 40s or 50s. They'd spent their 20s and 30s consuming, assuming they had plenty of time to catch up later. Then they hit 45, looked at their retirement projections, and experienced a moment of pure panic. How did I get here? Where did the time go? Some of them managed to salvage the situation through aggressive saving and smart investments, but they all paid a heavy price, either in quality of life during their peak earning years, or in anxiety about whether they'd saved enough. All of it could have been avoided by starting earlier and letting time do the work. Munger's advice was always the same. Treat your 20s and 30s like they're the most important financial decades of your life. Because they are. The money you save in your 20s is worth more than the money you'll save in your 50s, even if the dollar amounts are identical. Time is the multiplier, and you get less of it every year. This doesn't mean you should live like a hermit when you're young. It means you should be intentional. Every dollar you spend is a dollar that won't compound. Every year you delay is a year of potential returns you'll never get back. The clock is ticking whether you acknowledge it or not. The path to $50,000 isn't glamorous, and Munger never pretended it was. It's not exciting. You don't get to brag about it at parties. It looks like driving the same car for a decade while your friends upgrade every 3 years. It looks like living in a smaller apartment than you can afford while your colleagues stretch themselves thin for extra bedrooms they don't need. It looks like saying no to dinners, trips, and purchases that everyone else says yes to without thinking twice. But here's the magic that Munger discovered and that transformed his entire approach to wealth. Once you cross $50,000, the game changes completely. That money starts earning returns. At a conservative 8% annually, that's $4,000 a year you didn't work for. That's $333 a month. Suddenly saving feels less like sacrifice and more like strategy. You're not just stashing cash anymore. You're feeding a machine that works for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether you're sleeping, working, or on vacation. Your capital has become an employee that never calls in sick, never asks for a raise, and never retires. And the psychological shift is even more powerful than the mathematical one. Once you see that first year where your investments earn more than you saved, something clicks in your brain. You realize that capital has momentum. The first $50,000 takes forever, maybe a decade of grinding. The second $50,000, it takes 5 years. The third takes 3. By the time you hit $200,000, the money is compounding faster than you can spend it, assuming you don't do anything stupid. But most people never get there. They see the first $10,000 or $20,000, and they think, this is taking forever. At this rate I'll never be rich, so they quit. They pull the money out for a down payment on a car they don't need. Or they stop contributing because life got expensive. Or they convince themselves that they're too far behind to ever catch up, and they reset the clock back to 0. All that grinding, all that sacrifice, all that delayed gratification, gone. They're starting over from scratch, often in their 30s or 40s, having learned nothing except that saving is hard and the rewards feel distant. Munger watched this happen 1,000 times throughout his life. People would get within sight of the breakthrough and then sabotage themselves. They had the discipline to start but not the patience to finish. And patience, Munger believed, is the only thing that separates the rich from the almost rich. The almost rich have good intentions. They start saving, they make progress, they see the numbers grow. But then something happens, a wedding, a new baby, a must-have purchase, and they convince themselves it's okay to pause. Just this once, I'll get back on track next year. But momentum is everything in compounding. Once you stop, it's incredibly hard to restart. The psychological muscle atrophies. The habits weaken. What used to feel automatic now requires enormous willpower, and most people don't have enough willpower to restart something they already abandoned once. Munger's solution was simple but brutal. Never stop. No matter what. Market crash, keep contributing. Unexpected expense? Find a way to keep contributing. Everyone around you spending like crazy during good times. Keep contributing. The only way to guarantee you'll reach $50,000 is to make saving non-negotiable, like paying your rent or feeding your kids. He automated everything he could. The money left his account before he saw it. He never had to make a decision about whether to save this month. The decision was already made, years ago when he set up the system. And once the system was running, stopping it would have required active effort. That's the key insight most people miss. They try to save with willpower, making the decision fresh every month. Munger understood that willpower is finite and unreliable. Systems are forever. Build the right system and you'll hit $50,000, even if your motivation wanes. Rely on willpower alone, and you'll quit the first time things get hard. You want to know what really shaped Munger's philosophy about money? It wasn't business school. It wasn't some epiphany during a meditation retreat. It was growing up during the Great Depression and watching the world fall apart around him. Munger was born in 1924, which means his childhood was one long tutorial in economic devastation. The Great Depression wasn't some abstract case study he read about in a textbook. It was neighbors losing farms that had been in their families for generations. It was his father's law practice hemorrhaging clients who couldn't pay their bills. It was families cutting dinner into smaller and smaller portions so everyone could pretend they weren't hungry. His father was a lawyer, smart, educated, respected in the community. And yet his clients disappeared overnight when the banks collapsed. Men who seemed wealthy on paper turned out to have nothing but debt and delusion. You learned fast that intelligence is no defense when the system itself breaks. Being smart doesn't protect you if you're playing by rules that suddenly don't exist anymore. That experience burned one lesson into Munger's brain that he carried for the rest of his life: survival matters more than brilliance. During the Depression, the people who got through weren't the hotshots or the risk-takers or the people with the fanciest credentials. They were the cautious ones, the savers, the ones who avoided debt like it was poison. They didn't gamble on the market coming back quickly. They didn't chase fads or get-rich-quick schemes. They clung to what they had and lived to fight another day. Meanwhile, the clever ones, the highly leveraged ones, the big spenders, the optimists, who thought prosperity was permanent, they got destroyed. Some never recovered financially. Some never recovered mentally. Munger never forgot that. It shaped the way he handled money his entire life. While the world around him celebrated leverage and speculation, he quietly built safety into everything he did. Berkshire Hathaway isn't some miracle of genius, though genius certainly played a role. It's a monument to survival. Munger and Buffett always asked the same question before any major decision: what happens if we're wrong? And they structured their lives and their business so that if they were wrong, they'd still be standing. That's the Depression talking. That's the memory of watching smart, capable men get wiped out because they assumed the good times would last forever. Most people today don't have that reference point. They've lived through recessions. Sure, maybe they remember 2008 or the COVID crash, but they've never seen a true systemic collapse where the banks close, the currency becomes questionable, and the social contract itself seems to break down. Munger saw it, and it left him with a deep, almost primal fear of vulnerability. He never wanted to be the guy who had looked wealthy but turned out to be one bad month from ruin. He never wanted to be dependent on systems that could collapse or on people who could change their minds. So he built a fortress, not a physical one, a financial one. Cash reserves, diversified holdings, zero debt. The fortress gave him the ability to survive any storm, and just as importantly, the ability to take advantage when others were panicking. When the 1973-74 market crash happened, Munger didn't panic. He bought when others were selling at fire sale prices because they were over-leveraged and desperate. Munger was accumulating assets that would compound for decades. That's what real wealth looks like. It's not about having the biggest house or the fanciest car. It's about having the resources and the mental fortitude to stay calm when everyone else is losing their mind. The Depression taught Munger that chaos is inevitable. Markets crash. Economies falter. Systems break. The only question is whether you'll be ready when it happens. And here's the hard truth. You only get ready during the good times. You build your fortress when the sun is shining, not when the storm hits. If you wait until things get scary to start saving, you're already too late. The people who survived the Depression were the ones who had built their defenses during the 1920s, before anyone thought it was necessary. Munger applied that same logic throughout his life. He never assumed good times would last. He never spent money just because he had it. He never got comfortable. Even when he was worth hundreds of millions, he maintained the same cautious mindset he developed as a boy watching the world fall apart. Some people thought he was paranoid. Maybe he was. But paranoia about money kept him safe for 99 years, while optimism destroyed countless others. In Munger's view, a little paranoia about finances isn't a character flaw, it's a survival mechanism. Here's what nobody tells you about crossing the $50,000 mark. And Munger was adamant about this. It's not just a financial milestone, it's a psychological transformation. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to get ahead and start seeing yourself as someone who has capital. That shift in identity changes everything about how you think, how you act, and how you respond to opportunities and threats. When you have $5,000 saved, you feel vulnerable. One medical emergency, one car breakdown, one unexpected expense wipes you out completely. You're living on the edge, even if you don't consciously think about it. Your subconscious knows the truth. You're one disaster away from financial chaos. When you have $50,000, everything is different. You have options. You can quit a bad job without fear of immediate poverty. You can take a calculated risk on a business idea. You can say no to things you don't want to do without worrying about the financial consequences. That's freedom. And freedom is the whole point of money. Most people think money buys things. Cars, houses, vacations, gadgets. That's the superficial answer, the one society trains you to believe. But Munger understood the deeper truth. Money buys autonomy. It buys the ability to live life on your terms instead of someone else's. And $50,000 is where autonomy starts to become real, where it stops being an abstract concept and starts being a daily reality. Munger would tell people that the discipline it takes to save $50,000 teaches you more than any MBA program ever will. You learn to delay gratification in a culture that worships instant satisfaction. You learn to ignore peer pressure in a world that runs on social comparison. You learn to think long-term when everything around you rewards short-term thinking. Those skills compound just like money does. The people who can't save $50,000 usually can't do anything else that requires sustained effort over time. They're quitters, not because they're bad people or because they lack intelligence, but because they never developed the psychological muscle of endurance. They've spent their whole lives seeking comfort, avoiding discomfort, choosing the easy path, and life rewards endurance more than it rewards brilliance. Munger had met plenty of smart people who died broke. He'd met fewer disciplined people who did. Intelligence gets you in the door. It helps you see opportunities and understand complex situations. But discipline keeps you in the game long enough to actually win. The smart person without discipline makes money and loses it. They get opportunities and squander them. They see what needs to be done but can't sustain the effort required to do it. Meanwhile, the disciplined person without exceptional intelligence just keeps grinding. They make fewer mistakes. They don't self-sabotage. They let compound interest do the heavy lifting while they simply refuse to quit. Munger believed that crossing $50,000 fundamentally changes your relationship with risk. When you have no capital, every risk feels existential. You can't afford to fail. So paradoxically, you either take no risks at all, staying stuck in mediocrity, or you take stupid risks out of desperation, gambling on long shots because you feel like you have nothing to lose. When you have $50,000, you can take intelligent risks. You can invest in yourself, education, business ventures, career moves that might not pay off immediately. You can afford to be patient with investments, holding through downturns instead of panic selling. You can negotiate from a position of strength instead of desperation. This is why the rich get richer. Not because the system is rigged against the poor, though certainly there are systemic advantages to having money. The rich get richer because capital creates options, and options create more capital. It's a virtuous cycle, but you have to get into the cycle first. And the entry point is that first meaningful chunk of capital, call it $50,000, call it $100,000. The exact number doesn't matter. What matters is reaching the point where your money starts creating opportunities instead of just preventing disasters. Munger watched this play out thousands of times. Two people with similar intelligence and work ethic, starting from similar places. One builds capital early, the other doesn't. 10 years later, their lives are completely different. The one with capital has been taking smart risks, building businesses, or advancing their career in ways that someone without a cushion never could. The one without capital is still grinding in the same job, afraid to make a move, stuck in place. It's not fair, it's not comfortable to think about, but it's reality, and Munger always dealt in reality, not comforting fairy tales about how anyone can succeed if they just work hard enough. Hard work matters, but capital matters more. And the sooner you build capital, the sooner you can leverage it into the life you actually want. Munger spent decades studying failure, not because he was pessimistic, but because he believed you learn more from studying disaster than from studying success. Success can come from luck. Failure usually comes from predictable mistakes. And if you can identify the mistakes, you can avoid them. When it comes to the $50,000 threshold, Munger identified a pattern in why people fail. It's not usually one catastrophic decision. It's a series of small compromises, each one seemingly reasonable in isolation, that together guarantee failure. The first compromise: I'll start saving seriously next year. That gets repeated for a decade. Each year brings a new excuse: car trouble, wedding costs, house repairs, kids' expenses, all legitimate, all manageable, but collectively fatal to your savings goals. The second compromise: I deserve this purchase. I've been working hard. Individually, these purchases aren't devastating. A $3,000 vacation, a $5,000 car upgrade, a $2,000 piece of furniture. But they add up. Over a decade, they represent $100,000 of purchases instead of $100,000 of capital. That's not just a financial difference. It's the difference between having options and having none. The third compromise: I'll invest when I understand the market better. People wait for perfect knowledge that never comes. They read articles, listen to podcasts, attend seminars, always preparing but never actually pulling the trigger. Meanwhile, years pass, and the compound interest they could have been earning vanishes into the ether. Munger believed that most financial failure comes from overthinking combined with underacting. People make it too complicated. They convince themselves they need to master advanced financial concepts before they can start saving. They need to pick the perfect stocks, understand complex derivatives, time the market. It's all nonsense. The path to $50,000 is painfully simple. Spend less than you earn, put the difference in a low-cost index fund, repeat for a decade. That's it. No genius required. No market timing. No hot stock tips. Just arithmetic and patience. But simple doesn't mean easy, because the real battle isn't understanding compound interest. A 10-year-old can understand that. The real battle is fighting your own psychology every single day for years, fighting the temptation to spend, fighting the urge to compare yourself to others, fighting the voice that says you're missing out on life. Munger saw people fail this battle in predictable ways. They'd start strong, Save for a year or two, build up $10,000 or $15,000. Then something would happen. A friend would buy a new car, and suddenly their reliable Honda felt embarrassing. A relative would renovate their house, and suddenly their apartment felt inadequate. A colleague would take an exotic vacation, and suddenly their staycation felt like deprivation. And that's when they'd crack. They'd pull money out of savings just this once to upgrade something. Or they'd stop contributing for a few months to afford a lifestyle boost. And before they knew it, they were back at square one, having wasted years of grinding for nothing. The tragedy, Munger would say, is that these people had done the hard part. They'd developed the saving habit. They'd built the initial momentum. They were within a few years of reaching the inflection point, where compound interest would start doing serious work. But they quit right before the breakthrough, like a marathon runner stopping at mile 25. Munger had a saying, "Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the outcome." When it comes to saving, the incentives are all backwards. Society rewards spending. Social media celebrates consumption. Your friends respect visible success more than hidden wealth. The immediate incentive is always to spend, and the benefits of saving are distant and abstract. This is why Munger believed that successful savers are, by definition, contrarians. They're doing something their brain actively resists. They're delaying rewards that their psychology is screaming for right now. They're playing a different game than everyone around them, and getting no applause for it. The people who make it to $50,000 are the ones who can generate their own incentives internally. They don't need external validation. They don't need friends to cheer them on. They have a vision of their future self that's compelling enough to override their present self's desire for comfort and status. Munger compared it to physical fitness. Everyone knows exercise is good for you. Everyone knows vegetables are healthier than donuts. But knowing doesn't matter. What matters is whether you can actually execute on the knowledge day after day when your body is tired and donuts are easier, and nobody's watching. Financial discipline is the same. It's not an information problem. It's an execution problem. And execution comes down to whether you can stay focused on long-term outcomes when every short-term incentive is pulling you in the opposite direction. So here's what Munger would tell anyone listening, distilled from nearly a century of watching people succeed and fail with money. If you don't have $50,000 saved yet, make that your only financial goal. Not buying a house, not upgrading your car, not impressing anyone with your lifestyle. Just get to $50,000. Cut every expense you can without making yourself miserable. Live like you make half of what you actually earn. Automate your savings so you never see the money and can't spend it on impulse. And above all, stop comparing yourself to people who are losing the game while looking like they're winning it. The path is simple. The path is also brutally hard. You'll want to quit 100 times. Your friends will mock you for being cheap. Your family will question your choices. Your brain will beg you to give up and just enjoy life like everyone else. Don't listen. Crossing $50,000 is the price of admission to real wealth. Until you pay it, you're not even playing the game. You're just pretending, like everyone else who complains about money but refuses to do what it takes to build it. Munger lived to 99 years old. He saw empires rise and fall. He saw fortunes made and lost. He saw every kind of economic chaos imaginable. Depressions, recessions, crashes, bubbles, panics, and through all of it, one pattern held true. The people who built lasting wealth all had one thing in common. They reached their first $50,000 and never looked back. They didn't get distracted. They didn't get discouraged. They didn't convince themselves they deserved to spend it. They understood that the first $50,000 is the foundation and everything else is built on top of it. Lose the foundation and everything collapses. The question is, will you be one of the people who crosses that threshold, or will you spend your whole life wishing you'd started sooner, saved more, and ignored the people telling you to live in the moment? The choice is yours, but the clock is ticking. And unlike money, time doesn't compound, it just runs out. Munger knew this better than anyone. He lived 99 years, but even that wasn't enough time to fix every mistake or seize every opportunity. None of us have unlimited time. We have today. We have this year. We have whatever runway we have left. Use it wisely. Start today, not tomorrow. Build the $50,000, then build the next $50,000, and keep building until you have the freedom to live on your own terms. That's what Munger did. That's what anyone who takes money seriously has always done. The world is full of people with good intentions and empty bank accounts. Don't be one of them. Be the person who understands that wealth is built in silence, compound interest is built on patience, and freedom is built on discipline. Be the person who does the hard thing now, so you don't have to do the impossible thing later. That's the lesson. That's the path. That's what Charlie Munger learned over nearly a century of life, and if you're smart, you won't need a century to figure it out. You'll start today.